All right, hello everybody. Scott Embry here with NAIFA Michigan, your president, and joining me here is Jason Wadaga from KDA, our lobbying our group in Lansing. And I thought we would just wrap up the year with an interview with Jason to kind of just see how we did this year in Lansing. So, Jason, welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Scott, for having me. And hello to everybody. And I hope you have a great Christmas, great New Year's. Just wanted to kind of run down with everybody where the legislature is at right now for 2023, moving into 2024. And then I know Scott and I wanted to get through some of the accomplishments for NAIFA Michigan this year with the legislature, kind of what we're looking at in the future. Um, 2023 was a much different year than what we've had in a long time in the legislature for a number of reasons. Number one, in 2022, the Democrats took over the majority of the Michigan Senate. That was the first time that had happened in 40 years. So it was 1983, the last time the Democrats controlled the Michigan Senate. In the 2022 election, the Democrats also took over control of the Michigan House of Representatives. It was the first time since 2010 that that had happened. And as we know, Governor Whitmer is a Democrat, so the Democrats controlled both chambers of the legislature and the governor's office. So it's what's called the Democratic trifecta. Um, Along with that, typically, the legislature would adjourn for the year after Christmas, officially adjourn after Christmas for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into a little bit. Um, the legislature adjourned this year in early November. So they've been gone now since early November and will return at their normal time in January. The reason for the early adjournment is number one, legislation that's passed throughout the year does not take effect until a certain amount of days after adjournment. So the Democrats wanted to push up the adjournment date to allow some of that legislation to take effect that they had passed in 2023 sooner than it would have normally happened. Second reason is I mentioned the House Democrats had taken majority this year. They had 56 seats. The Republicans had 54 seats. Two members of the House Democrat caucus ran for mayor in their hometowns in early November this year, and both of them won, taking that 56-54 majority to a 54-54 tie, meaning it was very difficult, if not impossible, to pass controversial legislation the rest of the year. So that was the reason for the early adjournment. The governor has called a special primary election to fill those seats in January and a special general election to fill those seats in April. So in early 2024, you'll see committee work being done in the House of Representatives, but probably not anything controversial passing off the House floor until those two seats are filled. Meanwhile, the Senate Democrats keep their majority. They're still in the same situation they were last year, so they can do a bit more floor activity in the Michigan Senate here early in 2024. So it has been a very different last 11 and a half months from what I've seen in my time in Lansing.
All right. Yeah, that's certainly an interesting kind of events that have happened. It's like you got the majority and then you go run for mayor to to lose the majority, and
Yes.
then we're gonna have all these different special elections, just more elections.
Yes.
So just kind of staying on topic in regards to both chambers being controlled by Democrats and the governor's office, obviously, on the Democrat side of things. How was that for you as a lobbying firm, and how did that kind of affect NAIFA Michigan's work?
Well, the biggest thing is relationships. Obviously, our job is having relationships and trust with legislators that we deal with. And the reality is, when the Republicans have been in the majority party for so long, you typically work with them more. They're the committee chairs. Um, they s- the legislation that they introduce has a better chance of moving than the minority party does. So you just build a better relationship and rapport with those legislators in charge and their staff. So the biggest difficulty is now you have to turn your focus to legislators that you didn't have as great of a relationship with over previous years, simply because they weren't in the majority party. Um, so that's been the most difficult part of it. And then the onboarding of new staff. The Democrats picking up, your budgets are bigger, so you get much more staff when you're in the majority party, which means much more new staff. So when those staffers are onboarded, you have to get to know those new folks. I will say one thing that NAIFA Michigan has always been very good at, is being bipartisan. Um, we've had several speakers this past year at our Day on the Hill in Lansing were Democrats, bill sponsors, committee chairs, that type of thing. But even going back previous to that, when we used to do our local meetings and various NAIFA events, we always included Democrats in that, and we had decent attendance from Democrat legislators. And if you may recall, Scott, a couple of years ago here at our office in Lansing, we had done an event prior to our Day on the Hill, and at the time, Representative Joe Tate was one of our guests, who is now Speaker Joe Tate. So he's the man in charge of the Michigan House of Representatives. So um, we've tried to be as bipartisan as you can. It's just difficult when one party's in charge and one's not on
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah. The norm was changed. So there's probably a lesson learned there with KDA a little bit. Diversify the relationships a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah, our association is a pretty like you said, it's a partisan organization. I mean, we don't have any controversial bills that we would even think about passing, right? So that kind of leads me into another question, and I've always pondered this too. Um, have you ever considered whether NAIFA Michigan should be a little bit more assertive in its stance in legislative and policy efforts in Michigan?
yeah. I don't think we're at that point yet. To be honest, in the 10 years I've been here, NAIFA Michigan's always been very successful with legislation and very respected from both chambers. Um, there's never really been an issue that I can think of that's been overly partisan that we've been the main driver of. Um, and we've been very successful because of that. Now, um, no fault reform from a few years ago was very controversial, but was supported by our now Governor Whitmer. So that was probably the most controversial issue we were involved in, although I don't feel that was an overly partisan issue. I will say that you only have so much political capital, and you don't want to rock the boat if you don't have to.
Okay.
So I think we've done a good job of that. I don't see anything right now that makes us need to be more assertive. Although I will say there are some regulatory issues, legislation introduced on regulatory issues that I think, if the ball gets moving on that, then we absolutely need to step up a little more, because it is going to greatly impact the day-to-day life of our members and the bottom line of our members, on top of just causing um, some overregulation or some very burdensome things for our businesses. Right now, I think I like where we're at. I don't like to be the group that always sees the boogeyman. I want to work with everybody, play nice in the sandbox until you don't have to play nice in the sandbox.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense from actually, um, I guess, keeping credibility with the
Right.
staff in Lansing, right? All of a sudden, you start latching on to maybe some of these fringe ideas that you personally may like, but
Right.
when it comes to the association, that might not be the best way to move your association forward.
Absolutely. You want to, as an association, I think we should care about the issues that impact our professional life. And you're right. I don't think you want to be in the fringes. You don't want to burn bridges for the sake of something that really is going to get done or not get done, not based on our association, but based on politics that are above and beyond us.
Yeah, no, I agree. So moving on to maybe if you can give us some highlights on 2023, some policy accomplishments, or legislative accomplishments that we had this year.
Sure. Yeah, the big one thus far, and this was signed into law by the governor back in November, was the senior financial protection legislation that we had worked on last session and just kind of ran out of time. That allows you all to place a delayed authorization or disbursement of funds for vulnerable adults if you suspect financial exploitation. Um, so that was, like I said, something that we worked on last term and weren't able to get done. It's signed into law by the governor right now. We were the main drivers of that legislation, and was supported by AARP and other groups. Our bill sponsor was Representative Angela Whitwer, just outside the Lansing area, who's another Democrat that's been at NAIFA functions.
Yeah.
So we greatly appreciate her for her work on that. Um, we have passed Senate Bill 4704 has passed the full House of Representatives. That's amending the insurance code. Currently, there's a cap of a $5 gift of merchandise for life insurers. $5 probably doesn't even allow you to take somebody to McDonald's, to one of your clients to McDonald's. So it's been changed in several other areas of state law from $5 or $10. Our legislation would change it from a $5 cap to a $50 cap. That bill passed the floor of the House of Representatives, as I mentioned, with pretty broad bipartisan support. So we're hopeful by the end of 2024 that legislation is signed into law by the governor. And then the third big priority that we've been working on for NAIFA Michigan is the CE credits for participation in your professional association. That's happened in, I think, 14 states. Essentially allows DIFs, our insurance department, to set up parameters on if you're active in your association, you can get up to 4 credit hours for your CE. That's been introduced by a Republican in the House of Representatives, Joe Aragona, and a Democrat in the Michigan Senate, Senator Sam Singh from East Lansing. So we've got bipartisan support, bicameral support. So I'm hoping that this is the year that we get that legislation done as well. The one thing to keep an eye out on is auto no fault reform. There are a handful of legislators, maybe more than a handful, that would like to see some nibbling around the edges or even big changes to the no fault reform we passed a few years ago. The governor's office has made it very clear that they're happy with where we're at with the no fault law. But it's possible in 2024 you're going to see a battle between the legislature and the governor on auto no fault changes.
Okay. All right. And what else in 2024 is kind of on the docket in regards to what we're looking at?
Yeah, the regulatory issues I had mentioned, there's a couple of them that are a little bit concerning to us, and that's number one, mandatory paid family medical leave, and then just a complete change of how independent contractors are regulated here in Michigan. These are in their early stage. They're in their first. They're in committee, so they haven't passed committee. They haven't passed Michigan, the Senate, or the House of Representatives, but they are proposals that have been introduced. Um, the independent contractor legislation, we lobbied our lawmakers back in May on this. Would just create a nightmare structure for our members and how independent contractors are treated. We believe, in meeting with the sponsor of the bill, he was amenable to exempting our membership from that legislation. I think it's going to have a long road to be successful, um, but that's one that we really have to keep our eye out on. Paid family medical leave is another one that could be of concern. Essentially, creates a payroll tax for employers that goes to a fund within the state of Michigan to pay for people who go on paid family medical leave. Um, it's many weeks of paid family medical leave, and they don't have to be done consecutively. So it could be another big regulatory burden and hurdle for us to jump through. And also, I just think the mechanics of it would be difficult for small business to deal with, especially small businesses to deal with. So those are the two big regulatory issues that we'll be following um, in the upcoming year.
Yeah, okay. And the sponsor of the one in regards to the 1099,
Mhm.
is that Representative Hadsma?
Yep, it is. Yep.
No. And he was friendly with us in regards to our last bill, right? In regards to the senior.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, and we got a good relationship with him, and it sounds like if he's willing to exempt us, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other industries asking for exemptions as well. So
Yeah, there has been, and I want to say it was upwards of 80 or 90. I know California passed legislation dealing with this, and I think it exempted 80 or 90 groups also, which creates obviously a bit of a patchwork. But I think we're in a good spot with
yeah,
that legislation right now.
yeah, okay, yeah, and if not be exempt, I mean, if so many people are going to be exempt, it's like why even do
Why
this?
do it?
Yeah,
Right?
just
Yep.
squash the whole thing. All right, good. Um, how because we don't know what the elections are going to bring come obviously we got a couple special elections, general elections in April, and then we got you'll have a big turnout at the end of 2024 because it is a presidential election.
Hmm.
How do you think that would, what if it goes more Republican or more towards Democrat? Is there a strategy shift that NAIFA Michigan should be taking depending on what happens, or are we just kind of stay down the middle?
Well, regardless of what happens with the House of Representatives, the Senate will remain Democrat, and the governor's seat will remain Democrat. So there's a possibility that the House of Representatives flips in November to Republican, but I think our strategy stays the same because it would be divided government. Um, and as I mentioned, our issues are typically nonpartisan or not overly partisan issues. So I don't think, depending on the outcome in the February, or excuse me, the November general election, I don't think it changes our strategy for the following session at this point. You're still going to have to get support from both parties, which was kind of the situation we were in last couple of years. So, with the governor being Democrat and the legislature being Republican, you were still going to have to find that sweet spot to get things done. So I don't think that would change anything. Now, if it were a situation where the gubernatorial seat was up, Senate was up, and House was up, and there was a potential for a flip, then you might have to consider maybe a change in strategy. But for right now, I think we're good where we're at.
All right. Now, obviously, we have people that have been members of our association for a long time, and I know there's a lot of members out there that are just I pay my dues and
Mhm.
I don't pay that much attention to everything that's going on. However, we think that as an association, I've always said we need people and you need money in order to have
Mhm.
influence over there. Um, from the from the people standpoint, to make it seem like we have a louder voice, we got a lot of members that just simply just pay their dues and move along. What kind of maybe message would you convey to those members of NAIFA Michigan that just kind of pay their dues and they're not really actively engaged in the association.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I will say number one, if the CE credit for participation in the association passes, then it would be a benefit for them just through their continuing education credit. But on top of that, the bigger thing is it's the old saying of if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And I can tell you, this will be coming up on 19 years downtown. And as a staffer, I was there for about 9, and as a lobbyist for about 10. And those with big participation, both numbers wise and financially, typically are the ones that win. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's the reality that we live in. Participation is so important, with our day on the Hill in May. I've always thought NAIFA does a really good job of being active, although those numbers from our day in the Hill have really fallen off in the last couple of years for whatever reason. And I understand that people are busy and you all are small business folks with a job, but that one day on the Hill, that one or two potential relationships with the legislator that is from your district that you may or may not see in the grocery store is so important. So often you see things that get done around here because a legislator or a lawmaker knows somebody within that industry, and that's how you find your champions on your issues. So the participation is, you're going to get back what you put into it, and it's so valuable with what we do here to be active.
No, I agree. It's when something comes up, something crosses the table in regards to a bill or something, and we need to get in the ear of a staffer or something. It's always good to have that hometown person that knows them from church or from
Yep.
kids stuff to just call them up and say, hey, I'm an industry expert in this. I see this is coming across your desk. I'd like to offer my opinion on where I stand on this, and maybe we can have a conversation about it. That's way
Yeah.
easier to do when you already know them.
Yeah.
And I think that day on the Hill really helps start that conversation. I met with I have a new representative that I got to meet with. I met with her and I met with her staff, and she gave me her cell phone number. She's like, just text me, whenever anything comes up. And I've thanked her for voting in favor of our bills via text. And you kind of just build a relationship. You don't know how long she's going to be there or whatnot. But I know I've recognized her staffer from somebody else's office from years prior. So the staff seems to not leave, even though the
Right.
representative leaves. So just having those little relationships are huge.
Right.
You could get somebody to buck their party, just to have them do the right thing, which is hard to come by these days.
Yeah.
Especially when, hey, if you're going to start bucking the party, they lose funding and they're not going to win their reelection or whatever. But if you get someone that wants to do the right thing. So, all right. Was there anything else maybe you want to share with us?
I don't think so. I just want to say to all the members out there, thank you. And that, NAIFA is such a well-respected group in Lansing, and it's been noticeable for me in my time here. So thank you to you all. We ask that you participate, especially with the Day on the Hill here in Lansing. We ask that you participate with the PAC, which is so important on driving the message for NAIFA Michigan. But appreciate what you all do, and we love working with NAIFA Michigan and with Kay and with Scott and the board, and all of you. It's been a pleasure for us. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for being here. And have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year.
You as well. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, you bet.